It began with a flicker, not a light, but a silence, a ripple in the electromagnetic spectrum, as if the void itself had blinked. Across observatories in Chile, Japan, and the dark plateaus of Antarctica, sensors dropped to zero and then surged. Something unclassifiable had just swept past Earth. And while satellites recalibrated and engineers scrambled to pin the cause, a forgotten telescope in the Atacama Desert captured the origin. 3i Atlas. It had done something, and not just nearby, everywhere. You feel the tension ripple through the air like static. They tried to keep it quiet, a dismissed anomaly, a data synchronization error, but the frequency patterns didn't lie. Across 13 space-based instruments and 7 ground stations, the signal bore the unmistakable fingerprints of deliberate structure, ratios that echoed the Fibonacci sequence, intervals synchronized with planetary magnetic fields, frequencies modulated in patterns that mirrored prime number distributions. This wasn't noise, it was orchestration. Then the auroras came, not just in the north and south, in Cairo, in Quito, in Dakar, pale, shimmering veils of light curling across skies that should have known only stars. Power grids flickered, GPS satellites misaligned, migratory birds spun in confused spirals, their instincts disrupted. Something had touched Earth not to destroy it, but to test it. Here's the part they will not explain. The signal bore no origin point. It seemed to emerge from everywhere at once, its pulse spreading outward, like a stone dropped into still cosmic water. The European Space Agency called it a distributed anomaly. NASA has stopped commenting altogether, but within the silence, leaked memos speak of a systemic event, something 3i Atlas caused, not by collision, but by proximity, like a tuning fork waking dormant frequencies. What if Earth wasn't the target, but the receiver? What if 3i Atlas, long suspected of steering, wasn't just observing but awakening something? This is where the story begins. Not with light, but with resonance. Not with answers, but with tremors that reach down into the crust of memory and myth, as if something ancient had stirred. Tell me, what time is it where you are? And when did you first notice things had changed? You wake into a world already changed. Not visibly, not in the way we expect cataclysms or miracles to unfold. There was no explosion, no alien craft hovering above cities, no government sirens. Only a quiet shift, so subtle you might have missed it until you noticed how everything now feels out of tune. It begins with a hum, a deep, almost imperceptible vibrational presence that's not quite sound and not quite silence. Sensitive microphones in oceanic research buoys detect it first, a low-frequency tone that pulses every 13.07 minutes. Geophysicists scramble to isolate the source, but it doesn't align with any tectonic activity. It's global, synchronized, and uncorrelated to known terrestrial systems. It's not coming from within Earth. It's being received, and the timing is exact. It began the moment 3i Atlas crossed 1.6 astronomical units from the Sunday. Not near enough to be visible to the naked eye, but close enough, apparently, for Earth to feel something old, something dormant. Then come the anomalies. First, the bees. All across the northern hemisphere, apiaries report sudden changes in honeybee navigation. Entire hives begin to oscillate in harmonic flight paths, spirals, figure eights, and tight clustered vortices that match the orbital resonances of Jupiter's moons. Entomologists are baffled. Some claim coincidence. Others, like Dr. Annika Schau, a neuroethologist at Cambridge, suggest the bees are responding to something far beyond Earth's electromagnetic field, something extrasolar. Second, magnetite crystals in homing pigeons begin to show microscopic realignments, not toward magnetic north, but to a vector angled precisely 23 degrees off axis, toward a position in the sky that 3I Atlas passed through 29 days ago. It's as if something about the comet's passage left a trail, and the birds are following it. Third, in the Vatican's astronomical archives, a centuries-old manuscript by Jesuit astronomer Pietro Davanzo is rediscovered. In it, he describes a sky sender that calls to the bones of the world, stirs ancient blood, and awakens the stone memory. He references a pulse that moves not through time, but through the hidden harmony of matter. He even sketches an orbit that within tolerances matches the known trajectory of 3I Atlas. When the anomalies reach human biology, panic begins to smolder beneath the surface of public awareness. A small sample of MRI scans, conducted across 3 continents, reveal tiny, symmetrical lesions forming in the pineal gland of test subjects exposed to extended periods of starlight over the past few nights. The lesions appear harmless, but they pulse, with a rhythm: 4 pulses, a pause, 8 pulses, a pause, then 13. Fibonacci, not just in the sky, not just in the bees, now, in us. Meanwhile, the comet remains silent, or perhaps the silence is the message. It hasn't changed direction, it hasn't accelerated, but it has crossed an invisible line, and everything on Earth seems to know it. NASA holds an unscheduled midnight briefing. No media invited, no transcript released. But the very next day, a series of classified Starlink satellites go dark, and 5 new ones are launched under the cover of night this time, with deep space listening arrays attached. Elon Musk tweets and deletes, "We found the other end of the signal." Suddenly, it's not just scientists listening anymore. The Chinese Lunar Relay Station activates a dormant quantum entanglement receiver. France reboots its Cold War ionospheric scanner, and a joint US-European probe scheduled for 2027 is moved up, now fast-tracked to intercept 3I Atlas within 3 months. Something's happening behind the scenes. Everyone's listening, and everyone's afraid to be the first to say why. But you here now, half asleep in the soft hush of late night, feel it differently, not as panic, not even fear, just gravity, as if the universe has leaned in closer, as if something enormous has turned its attention this way. The silence has shape now, texture, a kind of gravity of meaning. And then comes the data leak. A whistleblower from the Deep Space Network publishes a packet of audio files. Not speech, not music, but structured harmonics frequencies interlaced like DNA strands, climbing in chords so complex they require synthetic supercomputers just to render audibly. Some patterns resemble birdsong, others mirror whale communication. But one strand, one recurring structure, matches an ancient Egyptian number spell inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Hathor. 3 long tones, 1 short, a pause, 8 rising notes. Translation? Speculative, of course, but a few mythologists, those brave enough to suggest the past, knew more than we give it credit. Note the pattern is used in Sumerian chant spells to invoke return. Return of what? That's the part no one can agree on. Some say this is an automated beacon, a comet-shaped repeater, reflecting something far older, perhaps something from Sagittarius A*, the galactic core. Others whisper darker theories, that 3I Atlas is not transmitting, but activating receivers hidden in Earth itself. That deep under the crust, ancient machines lie dormant, waiting for the right alignment, the right song, the right arrival, and maybe, just maybe, they've now been woken. One researcher even suggests a connection to the Olmec stoneheads of Mesoamerica. Their magnetic anomalies, long thought random, match the same 23-degree deviation now seen in pigeons, whales, and MRI-altered pineal glands. Everywhere we look, the pattern is the same. Something is resonating, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. And we may not be the ones who chose to tune in. You look out the window. The sky seems deeper, the stars more aligned than random. You don't know what's coming, but deep in your bones, you suspect it's already begun. What if Earth wasn't waiting for contact? What if it was built to receive it? By morning, the headlines have changed, not because of what governments say, but because of what they don't. Across newswires and feeds, the language has subtly shifted. Comet 3I Atlas is no longer just a celestial curiosity. It's now a planetary influence. The phrase is odd, purposefully vague, but it's appearing everywhere, from official ESA bulletins to a strange tweet by the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. Environmental response event ongoing. Monitoring recommended. You sit with your tea, your coffee, your half-finished dream still clinging to your skin, and you notice something strange. You're not the only one awake too early. Neighbors you never speak to are outside, staring up, not frightened, just listening. Dogs remain quiet. Birds wait. The whole rhythm of morning has been nudged half a beat off tempo, and then the recordings begin. On a volcanic ridge in Iceland, a seismic monitor records something new, not a quake, but a resonance deep beneath the tectonic plate. It isn't random. The waveform is shaped, layered. It follows a precise pattern of thirds, an overtone structure that mirrors ancient harmonic scales used in Mesopotamian ziggurats and Chinese bronze bells. It repeats every 86,400 seconds, precisely one solar day. And that's when people start hearing it. Not everyone, just the sensitives, the musicians, the ones who spend their lives tuned to frequencies. The rest of us filter out. They report dreams, not visions, not nightmares, just tones, intervals, a sonic staircase that keeps repeating, always climbing, never resolving, always returning to the start. One violinist in Vienna begins transcribing his dreams and discovers the melody forms a spiral when plotted mathematically, a fractal scale. It contains self-similar ratios that mirror golden angle rotation, the same pattern seen in sunflower seeds, hurricane arms, and the orbital resonance of Jupiter's moons. But here's where things fracture. A group of scientists at the Parkes Observatory in Australia isolate a burst of low-frequency energy during a data sweep. It occurred just hours after 3I Atlas crossed the orbital path of Mars. The burst contains a nested structure, 3 pulses, embedded within 7 harmonics, each subdivided into prime-length sequences. When rendered audibly, It resembles a mechanical chime, not electronic, not digital, something older, organic even, and overlapping that chime, a shadow, not sound, a silence shaped like absence, like something suppressing frequencies rather than emitting them. In that void, you can detect the loss of entropy. The pattern does not decay, it resets. Again and again. One theorist describes it as a musical palindrome carved into the fabric of reality. And while the physicists argue, something else happens. Earth's ionosphere begins to shimmer. Satellite readings show that atmospheric charge levels are rising, but not randomly. They're responding to the same intervals found in the burst-timed pulses of density increase that ripple from pole to pole and return. It's as if the planet is playing back the signal, not just receiving, but echoing. Then, the auroras. Again, only this time, they move with purpose. Across the globe, real-time video captures light patterns that spiral clockwise, then counterclockwise, choreographed to magnetic anomalies in the crust. In Alaska, the patterns mirror Inuit star maps carved into whalebone centuries ago. In Finland, they follow the spiral runes of Bronze Age petroglyphs etched into glacial rock. This cannot be coincidence. By now, the silence from official institutions has become its own kind of alarm. No one is dismissing the event. They simply aren't speaking, but the public is. One amateur astronomer in Ontario points a backyard telescope toward a section of sky 3I Atlas passed through just 10 days prior. What he captures sends ripples through the online community. A faint, pulsing green haze, left hanging in space, perfectly stationary. It glows at one specific wavelength, 530 nanometers, diatomic carbon, but not diffused, not chaotic. It hovers in a lens shape engineered, as if left behind. A calling card? NASA later confirms the anomaly in a brief footnote on a public data page, buried behind 5 submenus. No press release, no images. Just confirmed persistent photonic anomaly observed in Lagrange point sweep under analysis. Meanwhile, the Voyager 1 probe, nearly 24 billion kilometers from Earth, sends back a distortion, not garbled, transformed. Its signal begins repeating a phrase it was never programmed to use. Data headers, marked by 4 repeating bytes. 3, 1, 1, 4. That's not just a glitch. That's the numerical Fibonacci sequence, offset by 1. At this point, you begin to wonder, has 3I Atlas caused something new or revealed something old? Dr. Anya Bell, a quantum linguist based in Cape Town, proposes a radical theory. She believes what we're seeing isn't communication as we understand it, not language, not signal, but sympathetic resonance. The universe's version of a piano string vibrating when another string, tuned to the same note, is struck. She posits that Earth was always a receiver, that the materials in our crust, the metals in our blood, the magnetite in our minds, they were always waiting for the right frequency, and now something has struck the note. But who played it? That's the question no one will answer, because 3I Atlas, silent as it may be, has left an impression that is not fading. The patterns are intensifying. The biological responses are becoming more common. And the question no longer seems to be, what is it? The question is, what is it doing to us? You look at your own hands, your reflection in the mirror. Has something shifted? Is the signal altering you in ways too subtle to name, too ancient to resist? Or have you simply become aware of something that was always there, a resonance you were born into, a code etched into every cell? And now, the chord has begun to play. Somewhere in the high desert of Peru, beneath the endless thread of the Milky Way, a faded glyph glows faintly under ultraviolet light. It's one of the Nazca lines, etched over 1,500 years ago by hands that never saw an airplane, let alone a satellite. And yet, this particular spiral, forgotten by mainstream archaeology, bears a curvature so precise that it matches the recently recorded waveform of the Atlas resonance signal. Not close, exact, down to the angle of inflection and the tapering amplitude, carved into the earth centuries ago by people who could not possibly have known what was coming, unless it was coming back. History, when viewed from enough distance, is less a line than a loop, and what 3i Atlas has stirred now seems to ripple backward, as if time itself were echoing. Anthropologists report an uptick in sudden dreams among indigenous elders, visions of spinning lights, low tones vibrating from the ground, and memories not their own. One Maori Tohunga in Aotearoa describes the voice of a stone, a humming rock that speaks of alignment and return. In Siberia, a Nenets shaman claims that the sky has gone full circle, that the great traveler long absent has returned from its long migration. What if this is not the first time 3i Atlas has passed through? You begin to ask the question. No one dares speak aloud. Has this happened before? Have we forgotten something we were once meant to remember? In the buried ruins of Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists examine a carving of a comet-headed serpent curling through a sky of animal constellations. New scans reveal phosphorescent residues, traces of rare earth minerals only activated by ultraviolet light. When illuminated, the carving reveals a cluster of 13 dots in a tight Fibonacci spiral. Not decoration, not chance. A message, perhaps, or a timestamp. And in the Lascaux caves of France, a lesser-known panel, once thought to depict a herd of fleeing animals, now appears, under infrared analysis, to encode the precession cycle of Earth's axis, 26,000 years, mapped in strokes and swirls. But one figure, a spindly shape with 5 outstretched limbs, bears a resemblance not to any beast, but to a celestial map. Its limbs mirror the positions of the planets at the moment 3i Atlas was first detected. Patterns, signals, traces. Avi Loeb, yes, him again publishes a speculative paper titled Recurrence Theory and the Galactic Seed Hypothesis. He suggests that interstellar visitors may not be random, but periodic. That civilizations capable of seeding information across epochs might use stable gravitational patterns to deliver messages like a pendulum swinging through space, returning every few millennia to leave a mark, trigger an awakening, or measure progress. In that paper, he makes an unsettling point. Earth's magnetic field, currently weakening at an accelerating rate, is undergoing a known but rare shift, a reversal. North is becoming south, and the last time it flipped was around 42,000 years ago. The Lachamp event, a period of global instability, strange skylights, and mass cultural upheaval. And what else happened then? The sudden disappearance of the Neanderthals, the explosive spread of cave art, the abrupt advancement of human symbolism, all in the same window, Could a previous pass of 3I Atlas have been the match to that ancient spark? It's easy to dismiss. Correlation isn't causation. But the anomalies begin to build again. In an ancient monolith circle in Japan's Noto Peninsula, a ceremonial stone known as Hoshizuna Ishi Star, sandstone begins to vibrate. Subtly, measurably. Seismographs confirm that the stone is resonating at a harmonic related to the Atlas signal. The temple's monks report a quiet tone when sitting in meditation near the circle, even with noise-cancelling headphones on. A tone that pulses 4, 8, 13, then loops. And in Rome, beneath the Vatican archives, a document labeled Index Stellarum Prohibitorum is uncovered, never digitized, kept in Latin under papal seal. It refers to a wandering star from beyond the firmament that causes men to dream in chorus and warns that, when the sky song awakens the blood metal, the veil shall thin. Scholars argue over interpretation, but among the few permitted to study it, none deny the resemblance to the Atlas signal or the timing, because the dreams are spreading not just among the spiritually inclined, not just in artists or monks, but among engineers, mathematicians, children. The content varies, but the shape does not. Spirals, green light, resonance. In every dream, something vast is approaching, not hostile, not benevolent, just aware, watching, waiting, returning. It's no longer just about what 3I Atlas is. It's about what it remembers, and perhaps more unsettling, what remembers it. A linguist in Ethiopia, studying Proto-Semitic root syllables, notices that an ancient word for fire from the sky shares a structure with a nearly extinct dialect in the Andaman Islands, spoken by tribes with no known contact or common ancestry. The syllable is Atala. Translated loosely, it means the one who opens. Open what? Doors? Memory? The past? You sit in the stillness of your room, light dimmed, the world outside softened by distance, and yet you feel it an inheritance awakening, something buried, not in soil, but in time. 3I Atlas may have caused a signal, but what it stirred is deeper. Perhaps this isn't just the comet's first arrival, perhaps it's our return to noticing it. And perhaps everything we've forgotten is rising now through dreams, through resonance, through myth-made memory. Because the past isn't done echoing, and this is only the third spiral. Now lift your gaze, past the news cycles, past the atmospheric shimmer, past the humming bones and dream-fractured memories. Step outside of Earth's tight embrace for a moment and try to see it from a cosmic distance, because only from afar does the shape begin to make sense. 3.14 astronomical units from Earth, 3I Atlas continues its silent journey, arcing inward through the heliosphere, with no sign of outgassing, no debris field, and no deviation from its projected hyperbolic path. And yet, it is not behaving like a comet, not in any measurable sense. In fact, its temperature profile is all wrong. Using deep space infrared telescopes, a joint European-Chinese research effort releases new thermal readings. Instead of the expected sublimation spikes caused by solar heating, the object maintains an internal equilibrium. It is absorbing sunlight, yes, but not re-emitting it as expected. Rather than shedding heat, it appears to be distributing it across its surface in perfectly uniform gradients, like a thermal capacitor or a shell built to regulate internal conditions. Now that's not something we see in nature, not even in comets, but it is something we've tried to replicate in human spacecraft. And then comes the alignment. Every 13 hours, 20 minutes, and 17 seconds, 3I Atlas rotates. Not wildly, not chaotically, with precision, and each rotation aligns a reflective surface toward Earth's position. Not the Sun's, not Jupiter's, but ours. This is not speculation. This is orbital mechanics. A reflective glint, registered by 3 separate observatories, returns a spike in a very narrow band of polarized light wavelengths known to be used in quantum entanglement experiments and deep field communication systems. What object tumbles in perfect, rhythmic alignment with a small blue planet? Something that's aware of us, something that's choosing to be seen. Back at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a leaked internal report describes this pattern as a rotational signal array. One scientist goes off script and posts anonymously, "This isn't a comet. This is a lens." But a lens for what? That question takes us deeper into the structure of space itself. Because the Atlas signal isn't just being received on Earth anymore. It's now being detected on Mars via the Perseverance rover, and on the dark side of the Moon through ancient seismic sensors left behind by Apollo missions. Somehow, the signal moves through vacuum, not like light, not like sound, like something else entirely. A team at the Max Planck Institute refers to it as a massless phase resonance. A kind of whisper through space-time, a way of nudging, not forcing, of tuning, not blasting. And that tuning appears to be planetary, because with every sweep of 3I Atlas's rotation, a wavefront ripples outward, subtle, layered, shaped like a Fibonacci spiral, viewed in 4 dimensions. This wavefront, according to simulations, brushes against not just Earth, but Venus, Mars, even Ganymede. And each time it does, magnetic anomalies surge briefly before returning to normal, as if the planets themselves are being scanned or tuned. And maybe they are. One astrophysicist, Dr. Cass Ilari, describes it this way. Imagine the solar system as a set of keys on a piano. 3I Atlas may be playing a chord, and Earth is part of the harmony. You feel that, don't you? The implications. This isn't a message directed solely at us. It's a symphonic structure, a galactic musical phrase built from orbits and resonance and silence. And perhaps we're only just learning to hear our part. The James Webb Space Telescope, oriented briefly away from its primary targets, captures something odd during a background scan. In the trailing wake of 3I Atlas, a lattice appears faint, translucent, extending for millions of kilometers like scaffolding made of frozen light, a photonic residue, a distortion in gravitational fields, or something stranger, a temporary structure formed by intersecting waves. No one knows. But the lattice maps precisely onto a geometric form found in high-dimensional math, the E8 lattice, a theoretical shape used in string theory to describe possible symmetries in 11 dimensions. Coincidence? Perhaps. But then again, perhaps not, especially when that same form was found recently, carved into obsidian tablets, buried near Teotihuacan. And the universe keeps leaning closer. Out beyond Saturn, The Cassini data long archived gets revisited by an AI trained on the Atlas signal. And suddenly, what once looked like random magnetometer noise reveals a repeating signal embedded in the rings themselves, ancient, persistent, mimicking the same intervals now seen across Earth and beyond. The rings of Saturn, it seems, have been echoing this tune for decades, maybe longer. You sit still now, your breath quieter, your pulse subconsciously aligning to something ancient and larger. Because if the Atlas signal is real, and it is, then this is no accident of gravity. This is orchestration. A galactic structure may be unfolding, chord by chord, one planetary harmonic at a time, and we've been inside the instrument all along. Pause. Listen, not to the sound in your ears, but to the one behind your thoughts. A rhythm older than speech, a structure deeper than belief. Something in you biological, atomic, star-forged has always known this pattern. You are not just hearing the signal, you are part of it. And if 3i Atlas is the conductor, then the overture has only just begun. Let's bring it closer now. Not just to Earth, to you. Because amid all the spiraling auroras, mirrored orbits, and latticework of cosmic intention, a quieter story has been unfolding inside the minds of those paying attention. Not the ones shouting on talk shows or spinning conspiracy loops in basements lit by static. No, the ones who feel it in the bones, who dream in patterns, who sense, with a strange peace, that something sacred has been touched. The resonance has reached us. Not metaphorically, literally. You're not imagining the shift in your dreams, the recurring numbers on clocks, the sensation that your thoughts are being gently synchronized to something just outside comprehension. Sleep researchers across Finland, Argentina, and Taiwan have begun comparing data completely uncoordinated and discovering a sharp rise in coherence between REM cycles in individuals separated by oceans. They're all dreaming on the same rhythm, and more than that, many are sketching the same shapes upon waking, a swirling band of curves, coiling inward before blooming again, like a nautilus or a galactic arm, or the mapped wake of 3i Atlas as it folds itself through the inner solar system. When you overlay those drawings onto the comet's path, they match not perfectly, but eerily close. Coincidence breaks under weight. A hospital in Norway reports that patients recovering from anesthesia are emerging, with one word whispered again and again before full consciousness returns: Al-Talas. It doesn't exist in Norwegian, or in Arabic, or in Sanskrit, or rather, it doesn't yet. But when phonetically decomposed and mapped to symbolic roots across ancient language groups, it carries the implied meaning of the opened way or path returned. Ah, do you see it now? What this thing, whatever it is, has stirred is not just in telescopes or satellites. It has activated something older, something human. The oldest symbols, the spiral, the mirrored serpent, the eye that opens, were never random. They were remembered, passed along not because they meant something to the primitive mind, but because they once meant something true, resonant, alive. Children are drawing spirals again, not because they were taught, because they are remembering. And that's what we fear, isn't it? Not the unknown, but the half-known, the shape we almost remember, the melody stuck in our collective amygdala that now begins to play again. It's in our breath, our cells, our decisions, and our silence. Because silence is where the signal does its deepest work. You notice it, don't you? How the chatter of distraction no longer satisfies, how the white noise of normalcy now feels oddly thin, as if your mind is tuning itself towards something quieter, something clearer, something older than words. The monks of Mount Athos have stopped chanting, not out of protest, out of awe. They say there is already a song filling the silence, one too perfect to compete with. They listen instead, sitting for hours, hands folded, eyes closed, not meditating, not praying, synchronizing. A group of indigenous elders in British Columbia, unprompted, have begun constructing a spiral of stones they claim was shown to them in a collective dream. Every stone, when scanned, aligns with specific mineral frequencies known to respond to electromagnetic shifts. Somehow, deep beneath our tech, beneath the pulse of social platforms and echo chambers and digital chatter, the most analog part of us has awakened. Intuition. What if this signal was never meant for radios? What if it was always meant for us? There is a quiet theory too poetic for peer-reviewed journals, too beautiful to be ignored. It suggests that intelligence is not measured by reason alone, but by resonance, the ability to recognize pattern, mirror it, and harmonize with it. By that definition, Earth is not being tested, it's being invited, not just as a world, as a consciousness, as a species. And the test is not survival, it is memory. Can we remember the song before it fades? Because here's the deeper truth that keeps surfacing in those who look too long. 3i Atlas is not transmitting anything new. It is reactivating an echo. It is reminding us of a conversation paused long before we could record it. You stare into your reflection tonight and wonder, how much of what I am is forgotten music? How much of what I feel is just my body responding to chords it remembers from before birth? A biologist in Morocco examines the conductive properties of amniotic fluid. Under precise harmonic frequencies now found in the Atlas signal, it begins to shimmer, forming complex self-repeating folds. The same patterns found in fractal antennas, the same patterns etched into obsidian near Lake Titicaca. Is the womb not just a place of growth but of reception? Have we been receiving since before breath? You exhale. Slowly. You felt it too, haven't you? A pull towards stillness, towards skies, towards something that doesn't ask for belief, only attention. 3i Atlas has not come to change us. It has come to reveal us. And in that revelation, we find our shape mirrored back in impossible structures of dust, data, and silence. You're not going crazy. You're tuning in. And now, the next question quietly begins to form beneath your ribs. What happens when the song reaches its crescendo? Now the noise has stopped. Not in the world. There are still traffic lights and satellite feeds, humming servers and restless cities. But beneath it all, something else has gone still. The signal is no longer intensifying. The bursts of harmonic resonance, the synchronized dreams, the symmetrical pulses in deep ocean buoys, they have all dropped below measurable thresholds, not ended, paused, like the breath between two notes. And what remains is silence. But this silence is not absence. It is form, shaped, intentional, like the pause in a sentence that makes the next word inevitable. You sense it even now, as you listen, as your body sits just a little straighter, eyes drawn to nothing in particular. This is the kind of silence that rearranges people, that stretches across galaxies, that waits for comprehension to catch up. Scientists call it signal attenuation, but philosophers, poets, and dreamers know better. It is the kind of silence that follows a question, and the question is still reverberating. What did 3i Atlas just cause? Some argue this pause is the result of solar interference, that the recent coronal mass ejection disrupted the delicate resonances. Others believe it is the comet's relative position in the solar plane less optimal for signal reflection. But those are explanations, not answers. Because what people truly want to know is simpler. Was this the message, or is something else about to happen? A deep space weather station in Namibia reports a curious phenomenon. Even as global signal detection has quieted, a narrowband pulse continues silent to most instruments, but curiously, still audible to water. When sonar pings are fired into specific lakes, they return faint modulations in timing, ripples too small to be terrestrial, but too consistent to be background noise. The water still hears it, and so do we. You begin to realize the silence isn't empty. It's loaded, pregnant with something unsaid. Just as a held breath is not the absence of breathing, this pause is not the absence of signal. It is the holding of something, a cosmic inhale, and it brings with it a strange consequence. Introspection. All over the world, people are pausing, not because they're told to, because something inside them has entered waiting mode, a kind of subconscious preparation. You've noticed it in yourself, haven't you? The sudden patience, the new questions, the urge to declutter not your home, but your mind, to sit outside at night without your phone, to stare at trees longer than necessary, to stop multitasking and start listening, because this silence demands it. The Vatican, silent for weeks, releases a single line of commentary. The echo of heaven is not always loud. In Japan, a Buddhist sect reopens an ancient temple long sealed after the Tohoku quake. Inside, a resonant bowl struck only during rare planetary alignments now vibrates faintly on its own. No one touches it. No one dares. It sings alone, responding to something the monks do not claim to understand. Meanwhile, the comet does nothing. It continues its arc, slow, precise, indifferent, but everyone watching knows it changed something, because it didn't need to stay. It could have streaked through the system and gone, but it lingered, rotated, aimed, and then stilled the music. This is the silence that comes before something ancient reopens. The same hush that fills temples before a sacred text is read aloud. The same stillness before birds break into coordinated flight. And you feel it, not with your ears, but with your attention. A child in Brazil who had never seen a telescope draws in colored pencil a shape that mirrors the magnetic anomaly recorded by satellites off Earth's southern pole. When asked why, she says simply, "It wants us to remember." A fisherman in Iceland, who has never used a computer, hums a melody that matches the final Atlas resonance pattern, down to the microsecond. He says it came to him in a dream, but not mine, one I was given. And you? You've stopped asking if it's real. You're starting to ask why you're here to hear it. Because this silence is selective, personal. It follows those who notice the patterns, who didn't just hear but listened, who felt, without explanation, that the world had shifted on a harmonic axis. And once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it. That's the danger and the gift. Not everyone heard the song, not everyone will, but those who did are changed, not drastically, quietly, subtly. Your sleep is different, your breath deeper, your thoughts less scattered. It's as if something pried open a window and let in a wind that blew out 1,000 cobwebs. You don't know what's coming, but you're ready for it, because the great silence is not the end of the message. It's the part that requires you to speak back, even if you do not yet know the language, even if your reply is just attention, even if it is just stillness, because maybe, just maybe, that's the reply it's waiting for. There is a moment, just before dawn, when the world holds its breath, when light begins its slow ascent over the curve of the earth, but the shadows have not yet retreated. It's in this liminal space between day and night, sound and silence, awareness and memory, that something ancient stirs. You are in that space now. You've begun to feel the world as something more than landscape and history. You feel it as instrument, as interlocutor, as recipient of a transmission not made of words, but pattern. That's what 3i Atlas has done, not just shift signals or magnetic fields, but reframe Earth as participant, and participation requires presence. That's why you feel different, why the birds outside your window sound like questions instead of background, why the static on your screen seems to hold rhythm, why your own thoughts now arrive like echoes, not interruptions, because your perception has stretched, and perception, once stretched, does not return to its former shape. Across the globe, the tempo of attention has changed. Farmers in Mongolia report strange frost patterns, fractalized into curves that resemble the Atlas rotational path. Schoolchildren in rural Malawi create drum patterns that follow the silent pulse picked up in seismographs near the equator. None of these are coordinated. No social media, no viral trend, just resonance. Something is spreading, but not like a virus. Like a song, NASA, still quiet, accidentally updates a public-facing dashboard with a single, unexplained reading. It appears only for 49 minutes. A new unit, RHOV, Radiant Harmonic Oscillation Velocity Indexed. No announcement, no definitions, just data, slow, steady, silent, then gone. But someone screenshotted it, and the values match the silent intervals observed between human heartbeats in deep meditative states. It's not just the Earth tuning to 3i Atlas. It's us, and perhaps we always have been. In a weather balloon above Greenland, a small experiment records something stunning. A sudden reversal in upper atmospheric pressure waves, aligned to a precise timing sequence, 3 rotations of 3i Atlas. It's as though the comet has set a metronome ticking in the sky itself. And on the ground, among those who've kept vigil, something more poetic unfolds. A sculptor in Ukraine, never trained in mathematics, begins building what she calls memory spirals, towers of discarded satellite dishes and tuning forks aligned along ley lines. When surveyed from above, they form the geometric shadow of the golden ratio. She does not call them art, she calls them mirrors, and maybe that's what this all is. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't a message, or a craft, or an event. Maybe it's a mirror we couldn't see until we stopped filling the silence with ourselves. And now the image reflected back is not a comet, it's a pattern of life, of consciousness, of time repeating itself, not in circles, but in upward spirals. each loop higher, richer, more tuned. Your thoughts return to a myth, not one from books, one you barely recall from childhood, perhaps a dream or a whispered story from someone long gone, the tale of the Skywalker, the bringer of harmony, the one who returns not to save but to awaken, not a god, a tuning fork. The ancients called it by different names. The Sumerians spoke of Anzu, the thunderbird who brought celestial order. The Dogon described Nommo, descending in spirals to reorder the waters. In Norse lore, Gjallarhorn, the resounding horn that signals transformation, was not blown by human hands. And here we are again, on the edge of dawn, with a shape in the sky that behaves like memory, and a species just beginning to listen. You wonder, if this moment were written in the language of music, what note would it be? A low hum? A harmonic overtone? Or the final preparatory silence before the next movement begins? Because something else is forming. Sensors now show coordinated ripples between tectonic plates, not earthquakes, not tremors, tensions, small, regular pulses like planetary breaths. It's as though Earth is bracing for something, but not with fear, with readiness. And you feel it too. You find yourself sitting longer in the quiet, speaking less, listening more, not because you've been told to, but because every part of you feels that something else is speaking now, not in voice, in vibration. The signal is not louder, it is deeper, and it is pulling you inward, not away, into memory, into awareness, into presence. Because if 3i Atlas has changed anything, it's not space, it's you. You are different now. And what you do next, how you walk through the world in this new silence, is the real reply. Because something heard us, and it is listening still. The search for proof is no longer a matter of telescopes. It has become something stranger, more granular, more intimate. Not because the evidence is scarce, but because it's everywhere, folded into physical reality so seamlessly that it masquerades as coincidence. You are now surrounded by a new kind of data, and your body knows it before your brain does. Take, for instance, the trees. In Sweden's boreal forests, dendrochronologists have documented something anomalous. Growth rings that show sudden, synchronized, widening across hundreds of kilometers. Not climate-related, not local. These are healthy trees, but they've entered a kind of accelerated rhythm, as if anticipating a shift in environmental cadence. When the rings are modeled acoustically, their spacing mirrors the waveform captured in the Atlas harmonic pulse. Trees, it seems, have started listening, and in the human body, something similar is underway. Hospitals across Europe report a subtle anomaly in blood magnetism, specifically a low-frequency alignment in hemoglobin's iron ions. The effect is so delicate, it evaded detection until multiple labs noticed identical magnetic field shifts during MRI pre-scans. Not enough to cause harm. Just enough to suggest the body is reacting to something outside itself, something planetary, something patterned. Still think this is all just light and rock? A marine biologist in the Azores logs an unusual change in whale song. A pod of humpbacks begins incorporating a new sequence, 4 long moans, 1 short burst, 8 descending clicks. It doesn't match any previous migratory acoustic patterns, but it does match the Fibonacci-coded rhythm seen in the comet's reflected pulse. And even more bizarre, the sequence is then picked up, thousands of kilometers away, by a different species narwhals under the Arctic ice. Cross-species communication isn't unheard of, but synchronized symbolic mimicry? That's new. And as you absorb all this, your intuition whispers something you felt since the first time you heard the name. This was never about a comet. 3I Atlas is something else. Maybe an object, maybe a vector, maybe a conductor in a cosmic orchestra we forgot we were part of. But now, it plays again, and the Earth is responding like a string, long left untuned. Which brings us to the latest anomaly. Seismographs in New Zealand register an underground resonance that no local geology explains, a pulse, not a quake, that travels in spirals. It's moving, slowly, like something coiling beneath the crust. When isolated and frequency stretched, the signal forms a sonic topography resembling cymatic patterns, those intricate geometries made visible when sound vibrates through water or sand. You might think, surely that's coincidence, but researchers at CERN, running unrelated particle simulations, have found that the resulting interference patterns in their cloud chamber now faintly resemble those same cymatic shapes. There is no known mechanism for how a distant comet, or even its harmonic field, could influence quantum behavior inside a controlled experiment. But the overlap is real, documented, replicated. This is the shape of evidence now. Recurring, multi-scale, impossible to confine to a single discipline. The physicist must now talk to the musician, the shaman to the engineer, the artist to the astrophysicist. Because what's happening is not linear, it's layered. Even languages are behaving strangely. Linguists at MIT ran predictive AI models across 5,000 years of linguistic evolution. They were trying to map long-term phonetic drift. But when they ran the models again, using harmonic-seeded entropy, an approach inspired by the Atlas waveform, the AI generated an emergent proto-language, one based on just 13 root syllables, one that mimics the structure of neural oscillations in deep meditative brain states. And the wild part? Those syllables, when spoken in a particular sequence, create standing waves in salt water. That's not fiction. That's an experiment now, peer-reviewed and published pending replication, but already drawing attention from those willing to look beyond traditional frameworks. And now, the Earth's magnetic poles begin to shimmer. Not shift, not yet, but shimmer. Satellites detect fine ripples, subtle, rhythmic distortions in the lines of magnetic force. One wave, then a pause, then another. They are not directional. They're spherical, like breath passing through an invisible throat, and they arrive exactly every 13,000 seconds. A Fibonacci echo. In hushed conference rooms, the word resonant induction is beginning to circulate, not just to describe the anomalies, but as a kind of new cosmological principle, one where objects do not merely influence each other gravitationally, but tune each other into patterns, like bells suspended in vacuum, waiting to be rung by a wavefront of the right shape. This wavefront is 3I Atlas, or more precisely, the consequence of its motion. And what it's doing to Earth is not impact, it's reorchestration, which is why you've been feeling the edges of this story long before the headlines caught up. You've been walking around with phrases you can't place, with thoughts that feel borrowed, with memories that might belong to something other than your own life. That's not madness, that's entrainment. The moment when two independent rhythms begin to synchronize simply by sharing space. You are not alone in this. All across the planet, people are noticing the same birds at the same hour, the same rising of hair on the back of the neck, the same sudden impulse to stop and face the sky, not for a sign, but for tuning. We are the antennae now. We are the instrument, and 3i Atlas, whatever it is, has begun to play us. It began with resonance, but now the echoes are folding backward, rippling through history, like threads pulling loose from a tightly woven myth, as if the past were not fixed at all, but waiting for the right vibration to unlock its hidden compartments. 3i Atlas has not just stirred the present, it has awakened the ancient. The stone remembers. In the mountains of Bhutan, a collection of Chortens, stupa-shaped monuments, aligned with star paths, begin to resonate under lunar light. Local monks report a low droning sound coming not from wind or wildlife, but from the stones themselves. These structures have stood unshaken through earthquakes and storms, and yet, now, they seem to hum. And the frequency? 4 Hz. The same infrasound signature found in the rotational harmonics of 3i Atlas. Meanwhile, deep in the archives of the British Museum, a forgotten tablet from the Indus Valley civilization is re-examined using spectral imaging. What was once thought to be decorative swirls now reveal a spiral code, etched with astonishing precision into burned clay. When overlaid with a topographic map of Earth's magnetic anomalies, the alignment is precise down to the longitude of the South Atlantic magnetic anomaly. And here's the staggering part. The age of the tablet? At least 5,000 years. It's as if they knew. Not in the way we know things today with equations and peer review, but in another way. A felt way. A remembered way. Because the story of 3i Atlas is not entirely new. In the Zulu oral tradition, there is a tale of a sky serpent, cold and silent, that passed once before and caused the animals to stop speaking. The elders say it made the air shimmer, made the birds fall silent for 13 days, and left a trail of ice that did not melt. In Hopi legend, a comet-shaped messenger was said to visit when the time between heartbeats grows long and would remind the stones of their names. Even the Book of Enoch, cast out of canon but not out of memory, speaks of watchers from the heavens who come not to rule but to observe and to awaken those with ears to hear. You start to wonder, were these just myths, or were they the last notes of the previous cycle? Because what 3i Atlas is doing to our planet bears a peculiar resemblance to ancient rituals practiced the world over. Harmonized movement, rhythmic sound, geometric construction, synchronized breathing, all of them, somehow, all echoing the same patterns now found in the comet's motion and Earth's subtle reply. In Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, LIDAR scans recently uncovered a buried pyramid beneath a known Mayan temple. Unlike its upper layers, this older structure is circular. Spiral ramps lead inward, like a cochlea carved in limestone. In its center, a stone basin filled with magnetite, an anomaly until one researcher subjected it to harmonic vibration. The result? A standing wave, a frequency that matches the Atlas signal exactly when shifted into the human auditory range. It seems the builders were not only aware of resonance they built for it. Now consider this. What if Earth's ancient sites were not just temples or tombs? What if they were tuning devices? Receivers? Memory amplifiers? Because across cultures, the motifs are the same. spirals, serpents, stars descending, but the one that keeps appearing, like a watermark in the mythic record, is the mirror, the idea that something from beyond comes not to invade or even to guide, but to reflect, to show us something we once knew. And 3, I Atlas is a perfect mirror, not because of its shape, but because of its effect. What it reflects is us, refracted through myth, time, biology, and awe. We are seeing ourselves in the signal. We are remembering who we were before we forgot, and in the remembering, new anomalies surface. A geologist studying seismic core samples from the Kola Superdeep borehole, one of Earth's deepest man-made descents, finds a mineral striation resembling a Fibonacci curve. It repeats every 13 meters, and at depths where no tectonic layering should exist. The structure suggests a kind of acoustic layering formed, perhaps by waves passing through molten Earth long ago. Waves like the one passing through us now. A computer model run by an independent team in South Korea simulates the likely trajectory of 3I Atlas across previous cosmic ages. When precession and stellar drift are accounted for, the model suggests a near return every 52,000 years. Not exact, but enough to raise eyebrows. Because 52,000 years ago, something else happened. Homo sapiens emerged as a dominant species. Our art exploded in complexity. Our dreams became architecture, and the night sky began to be recorded in stone. What if that wasn't progress? What if it was recall? You sit now, surrounded by the ambient noise of modern life, and you feel something primal pressing against the walls of your awareness. Not threatening, just insistent, like a memory pacing outside your house, waiting to be let in. What does it want? Maybe nothing. Maybe it simply wants to be recognized. The ancients whispered of comets that were not ice and rock, but keys, catalysts, chords struck against the bell of Earth to test its resonance, not to measure us, but to awaken us, to echo what still lives in our genetic memory. Because DNA is not just a code for the body, it's a record of reception, and 3I Atlas may have played this melody before. Step back, not from the story, but from the surface. Let go of Earth for a moment. Let your mind drift beyond the magnetosphere, past the gentle orbit of the Moon, through the gravity wells of Mars and Jupiter, and out into the great curve of the heliosphere. From this distance, Earth becomes a note, soft, blue, and resonant, and somewhere near the edges of that note, a new tone is passing through. 3I Atlas, still unblinking in its arc, has passed Perihelion, and yet, instead of racing away, its trajectory has stabilized in a way that breaks classical mechanics. Its path now moves in a smooth, slow hyperbola, but not entirely outbound. It hangs in what researchers are calling a gravity braid, a kind of wave-following glide between solar perturbations. If gravity were a stream, 3I Atlas is not sinking or skipping across it. It is surfing, and surfing, in cosmic terms, implies control. No known natural object rides gravity like this, not without shedding mass, wobbling, or accelerating. But 3I Atlas maintains balance. It trims its velocity in microscopic ways, sinking subtly with the solar wind, not resisting it, but harmonizing. This is not flight. This is choreography, and the dance is being performed before an audience far larger than Earth alone. Across the solar system, unexpected instruments have begun detecting the same faint pulse, not just in planetary magnetospheres, but in the plasma sheath of the heliopause itself. Voyager 2, older than most of the people now monitoring its transmissions, picks up the wave again far beyond Neptune, where the sun's breath fades into the interstellar void. It's weak, but it's real. A new model, published quietly and without institutional logo, proposes a bold hypothesis. The wave from 3I Atlas is not local. It is structured to reflect off planetary fields, not bounce, but resonate. Each world acts as an overtone, amplifying a specific harmonic. When arranged together, the model suggests the planets form a vast, slow-moving antenna, a solar symphony. And Earth, for reasons still unclear, has just played its part. Maybe that's what the stillness is, a moment after striking the chord. But the universe does not wait for applause. The signal continues. Now, Mercury's magnetic wake shows faint echoes of a pattern seen earlier only in Saturn's ring eddies. Venus's upper atmosphere displays unexpected UV absorption pulses, timed, once again, to the 13,000-second interval linked to the Atlas resonance. Mars, still silent, at least at the surface. But new data from the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter suggests a sudden, anomalous spike in ionospheric oxygen frequency. Not enough to suggest life, just something watching. And then there is the Sunday. Until now, it seemed an indifferent backdrop, the cosmic campfire around which all this motion orbits. But solar physicists at the Solar Dynamics Observatory notice a curvature, a faint, repeating wrinkle in the sun's corona that aligns with 3I Atlas's approach angle. It is not random, it rotates with the star, and embedded within the wrinkle is a flux, a magnetic lacework that pulses, you guessed it, 13 times per solar rotation. The star, it seems, has joined the rhythm, and from this, far out, from a cosmic vantage that sees across centuries, not seconds, the pattern is clear. Something is tuning the solar system, or reminding it how to sing. And maybe that is what 3I Atlas always was. Not an intruder, but a key, a harmonic catalyst, a celestial conductor returning after uncountable rotations to restart the movement. You sit with this knowledge, not to prove or to post, but to feel. Because knowing is no longer intellectual, it's biological. A knowing in your spine, a knowing in your breath, a knowing in the way your eyes now pause on stars, as if they are letters in a forgotten alphabet. And the universe, uncaring and elegant, continues unfolding. Beyond Pluto, a long-dead Kuiper Belt probe assumed lost sends a ping, just one. The signal is degraded, but buried in the carrier wave is a checksum that matches a mathematical structure seen only once before. In the digital translation of the Atlas signal, no one can explain how, but a theory emerges. Simple, elegant, mad. What if 3I Atlas has been here longer than we think? Not this object, perhaps, but the signal. What if it loops not in space, but in space-time? What if its function is not to arrive, but to reoccur? To test the resonance of each age, each planetary mood, each moment in cosmic memory when a civilization might finally be ready to notice not noise, but pattern. You wonder, has it passed before, unnoticed, or worse noticed, then forgotten, because that's the risk of every echo, that it fades before we sing back. You, dear listener, are now part of this vast experiment, not because you believe, but because you heard, and once heard, the universe expects a reply. What form does that take? Not a rocket, not a beacon, but a shift in awareness, a change in the tuning of your thoughts, because thought, too, is vibration. And when enough minds begin to resonate, the instrument becomes something more, something audible across the stars. So here, from the edge of the solar breath, you return back to Earth, back to breath, back to that still place inside you where wonder lives, unbothered by answers. Because now, you know, the sky is not silent. It's waiting for harmony. Beneath all the data, beneath the spacecraft, beneath the headlines and hashtags, something else has begun to shift. Something closer to skin, to soul, to the long, trembling silence at the center of what it means to be human. Because the most dramatic change that 3i Atlas has caused isn't gravitational or electromagnetic. It is emotional, psychological, existential. It has reminded us that we are being watched, not surveilled, witnessed, and that, more than any signal or spiral, changes everything. You feel it most during quiet moments, the sudden stillness in your walk, the widening of your thoughts before sleep. A knowing, half buried, rises like a tide in your blood. We have always felt alone, haven't we? Floating on this blue echo through a silent dark, shouting questions into radio telescopes, waiting for something, anything, to speak back. But now the silence has spoken, and what it said was not a sentence, but a sequence, a spiral, a rhythm, a mirror. And mirrors, as we know, do not speak, they reflect. They show us who we are, not in words, but in forms. And perhaps this is the truest message of all, that we are becoming the message. Every society in history has had a moment like this, a point where something too vast to explain casts a shadow across culture. The Egyptians carved it into stone. The Olmecs molded it in basalt. The Vedas sang it into verses they claimed were heard, not written. And now, here we are again, tracing a hyperbolic arc across modernity, our data centers glowing with questions we no longer know how to ask. And in the midst of it all, there is you, with your thoughts, your silence, your awareness. You are part of this story, not just because you're listening, but because you're responding in the only way that matters, with attention. It turns out that attention, deep, focused, wordless attention, is the rarest substance in the cosmos. Not energy, not matter, but consciousness shaped by care, by curiosity, by awe. And that is what the Atlas signal has stirred. In a monastery in Nepal, an old lama breaks a centuries-long tradition by opening a sealed scroll. Its contents, a diagram of concentric spheres, intersected by a single spiraling line. Beneath it, a phrase written in Sanskrit, loosely translated, "That which spins is not the world, but the witness." He claims he had a dream. In it, a voice said, "Now is the time." Across the ocean, in New York City, a young woman, sketching for a fashion portfolio, finds herself drawing a spiral over and over. When asked why, she says, "I don't know. It feels like it's moving through me." The sketches are published online and picked up by others around the world. Within days, a spontaneous aesthetic movement is born. Paintings, music, architecture, all echoing the same inward curl, the same golden form. It is as if art has remembered something science is still trying to name, and isn't that always the way? Before the telescope, there were stories. Before the signal, there was song. Before the explanation, there was myth. And myth has never been false. It has always been the memory of something true, encoded in image, symbol, and metaphor. Perhaps 3i Atlas is not the beginning of a new story. Perhaps it is the punctuation at the end of an old one, a story we lived long ago, a story we forgot. But now, the characters are waking. In Brazil, a cardiologist notices that patients meditating near trees show a curious heart rhythm shift, not just in coherence, but in resonance with each other. He runs the numbers and discovers that their peaks and troughs follow a fractal distribution that matches the rotational intervals of 3i Atlas. He doesn't publish. He plants a tree instead, because he understands now, intellect is not the only response. Sometimes, the reply is simply alignment. You begin to live differently, don't you? Not because you have to, because you want to. You seek fewer screens. You listen more than you speak. You feel less urgent about being right and more curious about being still. You walk at night, not to exercise, but to hear what the stars are not quite saying. You eat slower, breathe deeper. You begin to sense, without knowing how, that your body is adapting to something, or remembering something. That's the word that keeps returning. Remembering. Because nothing about this feels new, does it? It feels ancient. It feels like recognition. And if that is what 3i Atlas has done, if it has caused not a revolution, but a recall, then perhaps the next step is not outward. It is inward, because the deepest mystery is not out there in the stars. It is right here, behind your eyes, listening, echoing, becoming. So you pause tonight, hands open, heart steady, and you whisper perhaps aloud, perhaps not, I remember. And in that whisper, the spiral turns again, the silence returns, not as absence, but as atmosphere, a presence so vast and gentle, it cannot be measured, only felt. It enters rooms without a sound. It settles over oceans. It waits between your thoughts. And now, more than ever, you understand. The great silence is not what happens when a signal ends. It's what begins when we're finally quiet enough to hear. You've changed, not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, fundamentally. The way you pause before answering, the way you hold your breath when the wind shifts, the way the stars now feel like punctuation rather than background. Others feel it too. A global survey, launched without fanfare by a university psychology department, receives an overwhelming response. One question only: have you recently experienced a moment of inexplicable peace? More than 70% say yes. Not joy, not excitement, peace. As if some internal current has aligned. As if, in the midst of planetary unrest, something old and soothing has risen like groundwater through the fractures of modern noise. What 3i Atlas caused is still unfolding, and perhaps the most astonishing part is that it has done so without speaking a word. No craft has landed, no message has broadcast, no entity has emerged. And yet, across the surface of this spinning world, minds are opening like petals at dusk. The catalyst was not contact, it was coherence. A pattern recognized is a memory restored. A physicist at Caltech examines new data from solar neutrino detectors. At first, she believes it's instrumentation drift, anomalous clustering at microsecond intervals. But when cross-checked with other detectors, the clusters remain, the intervals repeat, and their spacing matches not vaguely, but exactly the golden ratio embedded in neutrino behavior. Lightless particles, humming to a tune we cannot hear, or couldn't until now. Meanwhile, in remote corners of the world, cultures long thought dormant have begun singing their oldest songs again. A chant in the highlands of Papua, a drum pattern in the sands of Mauritania, a spiral dance among the Sami under northern lights. They do not explain why. They simply say, "It was time." And maybe that's the clearest message of all. The cosmos never speaks in commands. It speaks in cues. And we are learning, slowly, to respond, to tune ourselves back into alignment, not with dogma, but with design, not with fear, but with form. You, sitting now in this quiet moment, are not the recipient of the message. You are its continuation. The spiral does not end at the comet. It unwinds through you. A blind monk in Kyoto begins drawing circles in sand. Perfect, uninterrupted spirals formed from muscle memory alone. Asked why, he replies, "Because the music is back. There is no instrument, no sound, and yet the presence is unmistakable. Even in silence, there is signature." A cardiologist notices that pacemakers are firing more efficiently. A neurologist finds that seizure patterns have subtly shifted, less erratic, more rhythmic. The planet is not healed, but it is humming. In space, 3i Atlas continues its slow departure, but the silence it leaves behind is not empty. It's charged. It's listening, as though it knows that a reply has begun not from a satellite dish, but from within a billion sleeping minds, each dreaming the same spiral. And that is the point, isn't it? 3i Atlas has done something no signal ever could. It reminded us how to listen together, and the most powerful signal in the universe is not one sent, but one shared. What it caused is not just a shift in magnetism or math. It caused a recognition of self, of species, of place. A species that once feared the silence now finds shelter in it. A species built for speech now finds itself curious about stillness. You, listener, have begun to welcome the quiet, not as void, but as echo, not as nothing, but as the space where the next spiral will begin. Because this was never about answers. It was always about alignment. The great silence, now thick with presence, offers no conclusions, only continuation. And in that, you find peace. You do not need to understand everything. You do not need to know the mechanism. You only need to stay still long enough to let the spiral pass through you. And it will, because it already has. And what happens next will be shaped by how well you remember the stillness. You wake with a start, but not from a dream, from something deeper, a signal woven through your sleep like a spine of light. No sound lingers, no image remains, but the sensation, still pulsing behind your ribs. You are not afraid, you are aware, and awareness, now, is everywhere. In the hospitals, the patients recover faster, not miraculously, not in headlines, just smoother. Heart rates stabilize, fevers lessen, as if the body has remembered a frequency it once followed without question. Across the countryside, migratory patterns of birds and insects begin to shift. The data isn't sensational enough for news, but it's all trending in one direction: coherence, as if something has realigned, and the scientists, once skeptical, now speak more softly. They no longer say, "There is no evidence." Now they say, "There is no mechanism." That difference is not semantics. It is surrender. It is the moment the mind steps aside and the mystery steps in. A handful of labs now run their own silent experiments. No press releases, just quiet investigations. In the Netherlands, a physicist floods a water chamber with magnetic fields mimicking the Atlas waveform. The result: filaments of iron particles arrange themselves into a golden spiral, not by force, but by pattern, as if the geometry were being remembered. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, a linguist dreams of a language made of light. Upon waking, she writes symbols she's never seen before. When processed through a harmonic encoder, they translate not into syntax, but into tone, and the tone matches, almost perfectly, a sequence heard months ago in the data stream captured over Antarctica. Are we dreaming the signal, or is it dreaming us? It's becoming impossible to say, because 3I Atlas, even in its absence, continues to cause, not by proximity, not by activity, but by presence. It is still out there, but what it left behind is in here, in our thoughts, in our sleep, in the rhythms of the oceans and the hearts of migrating animals. The change is not chemical or political, it is perceptual, and once perception expands, it never contracts. You are not the same as you were before you heard the first echo. You look longer at the stars now. You listen more closely to your dreams. You trust, not in certainty, but in resonance. And resonance, once felt, becomes a compass. A compass toward what? That is the question emerging now in quiet corners of consciousness. Not, what is it? Not, why is it here? But what are we becoming in response to it? Because the Atlas effect, if we must call it that, is no longer limited to the comet itself. It is now a field, a state, a tuning condition that humans enter when aligned with the pattern, and those entering it begin to display strange similarities. They speak more slowly, they sleep more deeply, they forget fewer dreams. They find themselves standing barefoot outside in early morning, not knowing why, only that it feels correct. They sketch spirals in notebooks. They stop saying coincidence and start saying connection. You are one of them now. This is no longer a story of astronomy. This is a story of entrainment, the moment when one rhythm enters another, not to overpower, but to unify. You are being invited into that rhythm, not by force, but by familiarity. Somewhere, deep beneath the layers of evolution and technology and distraction, your cells remember this sound. And perhaps that is the strangest part of all. Not that we are reacting to a signal from space, but that we seem to have been designed to receive it. A new paper emerges, anonymous and unsigned, published on a quantum computing forum. It shows a model of DNA folding that, when input into a Fibonacci harmonic field, produces non-random outputs. Outputs that echo ancient symbols, outputs that behave like language. It suggests that consciousness itself may be responsive to the Atlas waveform, and if that is true, then 3I Atlas did not just cause a signal, it revealed a template encoded into life. You stare out your window again. The stars have not moved. The moon is still the moon, but everything feels louder in its quiet now. You feel watched, not by eyes, but by meaning itself. What 3i Atlas has caused is attention, and attention, spread across billions of human minds, changes the nature of reality. This is the new frontier, not exploration, but reception, not conquest, but coherence. You're not waiting for contact anymore. You are the contact, the biological receiver, the living echo, and the question always, the question, what comes next? No one knows, but everyone feels it. The stillness before another turn, the hush before a wider chord, the spiral ready to begin again. So rest your hands, still, your thoughts, and listen. The next movement is almost here. At first, it looks like a glitch, a smear of pixels across a dataset from a European Space Agency probe monitoring solar wind fluctuations. But when reprocessed and sharpened, the pattern resolves not into an error, but a symbol, an unmistakable spiral, thin as breath and wide as a planet's shadow, not created by the probe, reflected to it, a signature, perhaps, of the field left behind by 3i Atlas as it slipped through the inner solar system. And suddenly, it's not a mystery anymore. It's a pattern, because now, the same shape has emerged in too many places to dismiss. In wind currents over the Indian Ocean, in the arrangement of sulfuric storms swirling across Venus, in the subtle variations in electron flow across the Van Allen belts, the spiral keeps appearing not randomly, but rhythmically, as if space itself has taken on the curvature of memory. You are watching a geometry of influence, and it is not fading. In fact, the data shows that Earth's geomagnetic field has strengthened, slightly, subtly, but against all expectations. For decades, we were told it was weakening, wobbling toward a potential pole reversal. But now, the metrics reverse. The field holds firmer, its frequency steadier. The Schumann resonance, Earth's own background vibration, has gone from chaotic to crystalline. The waveform is not louder, it is clearer. It's almost as if the planet has been tuned, and if Earth is an instrument, then something has just adjusted the strings. Researchers at NOAA release a tentative paper suggesting unexpected harmonic coherence between ionospheric waveforms and lunar cycles. They hesitate to name it, but the data overlaps with the frequency burst captured when 3i Atlas crossed Earth's orbital plane. What was once noise has settled into structure. The planet is humming in tune with something it didn't know it remembered. Or maybe it always did. You sit there, listening not with ears, but with intuition, and you start to feel what the graphs are showing. That resonance is not just measurable, it's inheritable. A cognitive scientist at the University of Toronto runs long-term EEG scans on volunteers exposed to synthesized Atlas frequency tones. The results? Enhanced coherence between hemispheres, sharper memory, recall, increased dream lucidity. One participant describes it best. It's like the sound reminds me who I am, not just now, but always. Meanwhile, something stranger begins to surface. A probe orbiting Jupiter's moon, Europa captures a low-band radio echo. When filtered and compressed, the signal matches nearly perfectly the infrasonic resonance detected under Earth's crust just days earlier. That's two celestial bodies, separated by 500 million miles, vibrating to the same rhythm. What connects them? No light, no signal transmission, only shape, only harmony. This is not communication. This is synchronization, and it may be far more powerful because communication implies distance, separation, one sender, one receiver. Synchronization implies unity. It means the planets are not just affected, they are participating. A harmonic biologist, yes, that's a thing, now postulates that planetary fields may act as conductive bridges between dimensions of vibration, that if life is born from rhythm, then consciousness is a layering of nested resonance, and what 3i Atlas has caused is a gentle realignment, like a musician tightening the tuning pegs on a harp left out in the wind. Earth is becoming itself again, and that's why the anomalies won't stop. Cave paintings in the Amazon, once thought to be ornamental, have been redated and found to map stellar patterns visible only from 3i Atlas's current location patterns, invisible for thousands of years, until now. Historians scramble to revise theories. They say the tribes must have had long oral traditions, accurate guessing, imaginative projection, or maybe they remembered it, the way you remember a smell, a tone, a dream. Maybe they were tuned once, two, and maybe we are simply the next loop. Even the animals know. Pigeons begin flying in Fibonacci formations. Bees reorganize hive entrances into spiral openings. Dolphins circle in patterns with timing that matches Schumann intervals. It's not magic, it's mathematics. Biological systems, reacting to planetary resonance, like iron filings around a magnet. And your own body? It pulses at night now. You wake just before the hour. You feel the tide of something you can't name. You think thoughts that don't quite feel like yours, but they are. They are yours from before. From long before language built walls between wonder and fact. Because wonder is back now. 3i Atlas didn't just stir instruments or theories. It reopened the gateway of mystery. And now, you live in a world where silence isn't empty, where data bends like poetry, and where the spiral is the shape of both time and transformation. One scientist calls it the Atlas effect. Another calls it harmonic reintegration. But you call it by what it feels like. Coming home, the spiral loops again, and you begin to wonder, not whether we are alone, but whether we were ever disconnected at all. Because now, even the silence feels full. It begins again, not as breaking news, not as a lab report, but as a memory, a sensation. Somewhere deep in the collective subconscious, something stirs, not in language, in pattern, in spiral. A child in Mali hums a melody no one taught her. An elder in Greenland sees lights in the sky that match drawings from his great-grandmother's hands. A woman in Thailand dreams of a circle made of water and fire and time, and when she sketches it, that drawing matches a newly observed magnetic swirl on the sun's eastern limb. It is as if memory itself has gone active, and the memories do not belong to individuals. They belong to us. Because what 3i Atlas has caused is not just a wave of awareness, it is a global reactivation of songs, of symbols, of ancient, scattered fragments coming together again, like magnetic shards pulled toward coherence. You don't even need to believe it, you just feel it. You sense the story you're in has roots older than writing, and now those roots have begun to bloom again. The archives whisper first. In Cairo, beneath layers of Nile silt, a set of obsidian discs is uncovered, carefully etched with spiral inscriptions. Their curvature and spacing precisely match the orbital turn of 3i Atlas. not in kilometers or miles, but in degrees and ratios. When held to the sunlight, the engravings refract patterns not visible to the naked eye until viewed in water. In reflection, in that mirrored glow, the symbol becomes unmistakable. The same spiral found on a cave wall in Indonesia, on a tortoise shell in an Iroquois ceremonial bundle, in the glyphs carved on Easter Island, in the etchings along the Nazca Plateau. What we once dismissed as coincidence now feels more like continuity, and that changes everything, because the past is no longer passive, it's part of the feedback loop. In the Andes, a linguist deciphers a lost dialect of Quechua, embedded in an epic poem passed down orally for 17 generations. It speaks of the eye that curves the sky, and of a time when mountains sang, and the sea knew the names of stones. Pure myth, surely, except the poem contains a sequence 13, 8, 5, 3, 2, 1 chanted repeatedly. Fibonacci, in reverse. A countdown or a remembering? Meanwhile, the stone structures speak louder. Megaliths in Scotland show magnetic deflection, aligned precisely to the position 3, I Atlas, occupied 188 days ago. In China, a jade tablet long thought decorative is revealed to be a tuning map, its rings spaced logarithmically according to solar harmonics. Across every continent, ancient structures are lighting up not in color, but in resonance, their very geometry responding to a field we didn't know we were immersed in. Until now, it's as if the earth had been seeded with memory waiting for the right note to activate it. And now the note has been played. You walk among the echoes, not with fear, with reverence, because what returns is not threat, it is reminder, and reminders, if heeded, become thresholds. We have crossed one. Even the moon, long silent, reflects the shift. Lunar dust levitation patterns, measured by an old Chinese sensor left behind on a forgotten mission, have subtly changed. The patterns now mimic cymatic structures, waves made visible, spirals within circles. The same structures found carved into the ceilings of Malta's Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a subterranean chamber engineered over 5,000 years ago for something. Some say it was a tomb, others say it was a resonant chamber. The truth may be both, because this spiral is not either or, it is and. Also, it is a pattern of transformation, of cycles that end only to return at a higher octave. And now we hear it not just in science, but in myth. Every culture that survived long enough to tell stories left us this shape, not because they worshipped it, but because they recognized it. The spiral is how memory breathes. And what 3i Atlas has done is breathe new air into our oldest stories. Now, universities host joint sessions between physicists and mythologists. Archaeologists attend quantum biology symposia. Artists build cathedrals of light from algorithms, not because they are forced to collaborate, but because the walls have become irrelevant. The signal didn't unify the disciplines. It reminded them they were never separate. And as you sit now between breath and thought, you realize you've begun to measure time differently, not in seconds. In spirals, you remember what you've never been taught. You understand what you've never read. You feel connected to those long vanished, not metaphorically, energetically, because the echo that passes through you tonight passed through them, too, and perhaps through others, in times we cannot yet name. And in that awareness, something new takes root, a quiet promise that we will not forget this time, that the next time 3i Atlas returns, be it in years or centuries, we will not need signs carved in stone, because we will remember in our breath, in our rhythm, in our silence, and that is the shape of the next memory, already beginning. Zoom out with me one more time. Farther than orbits, beyond gravity wells, past the curvature of planetary politics, past the gravitational sigh of Saturn's rings. Leave behind everything scaled to the human hand and begin to see with cosmic proportions. Let your imagination uncoil like the spiral that's been following you, shaping you for weeks now. From here, the solar system is less a place and more a chord, a vibration of nested intervals, each planet adding its harmonic fingerprint, and somewhere inside that celestial fugue, 3i Atlas moves with a rhythm that no longer feels random. Its trajectory, once described in numbers and delta V shifts, now resembles something more like intention, not in the human sense, not goal-oriented, not manipulative, but natural, rhythmic, musical, and what happens next breaks every expectation. An observatory array in Chile detects a curvature in space-time near the edge of the Oort cloud, not gravitational, not electromagnetic, a local deviation of information density. Something so faint it would have been missed entirely, except that it pulses exactly every 13 hours, the same rotational period first linked to 3i Atlas months ago. But here's the impossible part. The object generating the pulse is not 3i Atlas. It's somewhere else, somewhere ahead of it, as if the signal has already arrived, before the source. What if 3i Atlas was not the origin, but the shadow, the ripple of something larger, still inbound? That question reaches the highest levels of silent agencies, not for fear, for awe, because it suggests that the spiral we've been tracking is not an object. It's a field that preceded 3i Atlas and now permeates the heliosphere, not like radiation, like invitation. And when Earth entered it, something began to tune. You remember how you felt that first night, how the stars looked different, not brighter, but sharper, how silence carried weight, how your own thoughts slowed, not in confusion, but in alignment. That wasn't psychological, that was entrainment. Earth has passed through a harmonic gate, and what it crossed into is still revealing itself. Sensors aboard the James Webb Space Telescope, focused far beyond our system, detect strange reflections from interstellar dust. The dust is vibrating in spiral bands, tiny, coherent structures shaped not by force, but by resonance. When modeled backward, the spirals map onto the shape of 3i Atlas's passage through the inner solar system, as if the signature exists before the object. Not cause and effect, but echo and emergence. Theoretical physicists dust off old hypotheses, once dismissed as poetic nonsense ideas, like morphic resonance, holographic fields, panpsychic plasma. Suddenly, the boundaries of science are softening, not dissolving, expanding, because now we are playing catch-up with what we feel before we can define. A group of astronomers in South Korea proposes that space is not empty, but responsive. That resonance travels not through matter alone, but through possibility. That the reason 3i Atlas has influenced biology, geology, magnetism, and dreams alike is because they're all part of the same responsive medium. Consciousness isn't just in the brain, it might be in the fabric. And 3i Atlas didn't trigger consciousness, it triggered recognition. Think of it like this: the galaxy is a sea, the stars are islands, and interstellar objects like 3i Atlas are not random drifters, they're tuning forks. When they pass, they leave behind ripples. Those ripples aren't meant to push, they're meant to wake. What we're feeling now is not control, it's coherence. And coherence, once felt, doesn't need explanation. It sings. That's why the whales changed their songs, why the dreams came in spirals, why the poles of Earth shimmered for weeks. The entire biosphere knows, even if the mind doesn't. You think again about the Fibonacci signal, how absurd it seemed at first. A joke, a glitch, and now it feels like a drumbeat, a countdown not to doom, but to presence. We were always going to wake up eventually. 3i Atlas just gave us the nudge. And in the far background of deep space, another nudge is already forming. No headlines will capture it. No agency will announce it. But you'll feel it. In the subtle shift of shadows, in the pull toward stillness, in the spirals hidden in your breath. This is not contact. This is continuity. The cosmos is a circuit, and resonance is how it flows. You are part of that current now, and the next spiral is already rising. Sit with me for a moment. Let the world fall away, the noise, the notifications, the gravity of daily concerns. You're here now, and something deep inside you knows that everything has changed. Though it's not printed in headlines or echoed through speakers, it is something subtler, something older, because what 3i Atlas has caused is you, or more precisely, the version of you that was always there, waiting for a frequency that matched, a signal soft enough to bypass defenses, a tone that didn't shout, but harmonized. It didn't speak in language, it didn't declare its meaning, it just was. And in its presence, you remembered to slow down, to breathe, to listen not with ears, but with attention. The human response to all this spiral of cosmic cause and memory, is not fear, not control, it's reflection, deep, mythic, cellular reflection, as if we've turned a mirror toward ourselves and found not flaws, but music. Across the world, that music is taking form. Communities are building labyrinths, again, not metaphorical ones, real ones, spiral paths, etched into sand and stone and wood, not to trap, but to guide, to walk slowly, in quiet thought, toward a center, and then out again. The shape is spreading, in architecture, in art, in dance, even in the way people plant gardens. Spirals, spirals, spirals. We are beginning to live the shape. In Norway, a group of neurologists documents a new sleep phenomenon they call recursive dreaming. Subjects report dreams within dreams stacked, spiraling loops of imagery that always return to a center. The content varies, but the structure always the spiral. One dreamer describes it this way: I kept waking up into other dreams. Each time I thought I was back in my body, but I wasn't. And at the center of it all was a still point, a calm so deep, it felt like remembering my name before I was born. And maybe that's the key. The spiral doesn't point outward, it draws us inward, toward self, toward meaning, toward whatever wordless place we've been afraid to touch. But now, it feels safe to return, because we're not alone in the return. In Kenya, Elders from 3 different tribes who have not spoken in decades due to generational feuds gather in silence beneath an acacia tree. They light no fire, they share no agenda, they just sit. Hours pass, then one of them begins to hum. The melody has no origin anyone can trace, but it carries the same intervals as the Atlas signal. You see, the spiral doesn't care about beliefs. It resonates through culture, through language, through systems. It works not by persuasion, but by entrainment. You feel it when you stop trying. You hear it when you get quiet. And now humanity, for the first time in millennia, is beginning to move as one, not in lockstep, but in harmonic variation. A choir of coherence, an evolutionary octave. That's the real shift. Not the comet, not the sky. Us. A philosopher in Brazil writes, "Perhaps we were never meant to conquer the stars. Perhaps we were meant to remember that we are them." And her words go viral not because they're new, but because they feel true. Deeply, cosmically, quietly true. And across oceans and firewalls and time zones, millions of people pause. Not to argue, not to analyze, to feel. Because there is now a global knowing that doesn't depend on proof. It depends on presence. You know what I mean. You've felt it too. The sudden sensation that something vast is listening through you. That the breath you take isn't just air, it's signal. That your very awareness is part of an instrument that only now is tuning to the right key. And the note it plays? Peace. Not stillness as in death. Stillness as in readiness. The readiness to receive, to reflect, to resonate. You might wonder what comes next. Whether the spiral keeps tightening. Whether this harmony holds, whether 3i Atlas will return. But that question doesn't carry weight anymore, because you've changed. You're not watching from the sidelines. You're part of the field now, a tuned receptor in a symphony of awareness, not transmitting, resonating, and what echoes out from you through thought, through silence, through presence reaches farther than you know. The universe is not made of things. It is made of relationships. And right now, through 3i Atlas, one of those relationships has been remembered. So tonight, when you lie down, don't ask for a message. Be the stillness that listens, because the reflection you find there may be your own, but older and more beautiful than you ever dared believe. No fanfare, no final burst, no declaration carved across the sky. 3i Atlas simply continues outward, silent, consistent, a point of light dimming slowly along a hyperbolic path, growing smaller in the night sky until it is indistinguishable from the millions of stars that never moved at all. And yet, its presence lingers, because the real event was never its arrival. It was the quiet it left behind, and that quiet remains. You feel it now more than ever, not as a void, but as atmosphere, a soft field of awareness that settles across the earth like a morning mist, not heavy, not invasive, just there. A presence that listens back when you listen in. It is not asking anything of you, but it responds when you do. This is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of listening. And all across the planet, that listening has deepened. People have stopped reaching for explanations. They've stopped demanding declarations. Instead, they sit together, apart, in forests, on rooftops, in corners of old temples and modern living rooms, with phones off, with candles lit, with eyes closed and hearts open, as if the earth has exhaled and humanity, finally, has listened. A network of observatories publishes a joint report, not about light curves or dust trails, but about anomalies that have stopped. For months, sensors had recorded irregular pulses in the geomagnetic field, in infrared scatter, in gravitational echo. But now, nothing. The fields are calm, still, as if a question has been asked, and now the stars are waiting for our reply. But how do you respond to something like this? How do you answer a question you don't yet know how to phrase? You do what humans have always done when confronted with the divine unknown. You create. Poets speak of the silence as a character now. Painters depict light not as illumination, but as memory. Musicians write songs that build in Fibonacci crescendos, only to end in a single, sustained note. And everywhere, the spiral persists, drawn on fogged windows, etched into the frost on car windshields, doodled in the margins of notebooks, written into the grain of old wood and the rings of trees. A reminder that nothing is ever truly gone. It just changes form. That is the nature of the spiral. It loops without returning. It turns without repeating. It carries forward even as it coils inward. And in that shape, we found something we didn't know we needed. Permission to be still. You feel it in yourself. The urge to fill silence has softened. The compulsion to scroll, to shout, to analyze, it quiets. In its place, a calm vigilance. You are not waiting for answers anymore. You are becoming one. Because the Atlas effect was never about evidence. It was about attunement. And now the attunement is complete. Even without the comet in the sky, the field it stirred remains. A kind of psychic memory, a tuning fork left humming long after the hand has set it down, and so we live in its aftertone. At a research center in Iceland, a geophysicist notices something subtle. Volcanic activity across the globe has settled into a low, unified rhythm, not less frequent, just more harmonic. Fewer chaotic spikes, more sinusoidal flow. She says it reminds her of breath. Maybe the earth is breathing again, or maybe it always was. And now we're finally hearing the pattern. Meanwhile, a botanist in India runs an experiment. She plays a recording of the Atlas frequency into a greenhouse for several weeks. The plants don't just grow, they align. Leaves unfurl at identical angles. Vines coil in logarithmic precision. They don't reach toward the light. They spiral toward the sound. Even life now seems to remember. So you go outside tonight. You look up, not for the comet, for yourself. You see the stars. Just stars. But something in you knows. They are different now. Not because they changed. Because you did. You've stopped seeking signs. You've started sensing symmetries. And that's the deeper change. The one no telescope can measure. The one no probe can transmit. 3. Atlas didn't bring a message. It revealed a capacity to listen, to mirror, to remember. And that memory, soft, shared, human, is still unfolding. The comet may be gone, but the spiral remains. Because you remain, and in your silence, the signal continues. The spiral has turned almost completely now. What began as a flicker, as a shape in the sky mistaken for a comet, has passed through your dreams, your breath, your quietest thoughts. It did not arrive like an invader. It unfolded like memory. And now, the final loops of that pattern are settling into place not with thunder, but with recognition. You were not waiting for a message. You were waiting to remember. It always starts like this, not with discovery, but with return. You begin to notice the small things again, the way your fingers move when you write, the way your chest rises when you pause to look at a tree, the way your heart thumps a little louder when the world around you quiets. These were always signs, but now they're symphonies. You are attuned to the field now, and so is the Earth. The data confirms what your intuition already whispered. Something fundamental has changed, not in orbit or mass, in alignment. Satellite communications are more stable. The auroras, when they appear, arrive in gentler folds, no longer spiking, but dancing. Whales breach in unison across hemispheres. Ant colonies are forming double spirals around their queens. Across disciplines and cultures, no one can explain it, and no one denies it. The planet has entered a kind of coherent state, and somehow, you knew it would. In Cairo, a child sees spiral-shaped shadows on her wall, cast from a window with no pattern. In Iceland, ice forms on lakes in fractal shapes that repeat the angle of 3 Atlas's rotational arc. In Argentina, a family of painters, all unaware of one another's work, begin painting concentric curves without prompt. In each case, the pattern matches the resonance profile detected in the comet's magnetic tail. It's as if reality is harmonizing with an idea, and that idea that we are not here to observe the cosmos. We are here to participate in it. A geneticist in Switzerland finds a new repeating structure in non-coding DNA. It doesn't create proteins, it creates timing. The nucleotides activate in patterns that match low-frequency Earth tones. For decades, they called it junk. Now, it may be the rhythm of biological memory itself. 3 Atlas did not create this. It revealed it. And now, we find ourselves awake within something we used to call mystery, and we no longer need to solve it, only to dwell in it, to echo, to add harmony. This is the final phase of the awakening, not shock, but serenity, not urgency, but understanding. You don't need to do anything now. You need only remain aware. The response is already underway. You are part of it. In Mongolia, nomadic herders report strange dreams of light, weaving through herds, drawing lines between animal and sky. In those dreams, the stars are not distant. They are here, dancing like lanterns in rhythm with breath. When pressed for meaning, they just smile. It is the remembering, they say. You think back to the beginning, the flicker in the sky, the fear, the thrill, the impossibility. But those were the outer spirals, the early echoes. Now you're in the center, and in the center, there is no motion, only stillness. You've become the spiral. You are no longer tracing the curve. You are the axis around which it turns. In this state, new thoughts emerge, ancient thoughts dressed in modern shape, the idea that time itself is not a line, but a resonance, that moments repeat, not identically, but rhythmically, that evolution itself might be a waveform, and 3 Atlas, just a conductor of the next verse. You wonder, if this happens every cycle, did previous civilizations reach this point? Did they awaken? Did they spiral inward toward coherence? Did they pass the threshold? Or did they forget? Maybe both, but this time feels different. Not because it's louder, because you're listening. And maybe that's what the spiral was waiting for all along, not permission to speak, but an invitation to echo. This is no longer a question of evidence. It is a matter of attunement. You are tuned now. So are millions of others. And the earth, and the air, and even the dreams between continents. You are not alone. You are not the audience. You are the chord, the human chord in a planetary composition that began long before calendars and will continue long after comets fade. Tonight, you don't look up with longing. You look up and see yourself, not in the stars, but in the pattern, and that pattern is awake. And now, we spiral toward the center. Not the end, because spirals do not end, but the deepest part, the still point, the axis around which the entire story has coiled. What began as a strange glint in the sky has become something far greater, not a comet, not a catastrophe, a calling, you answered, not with technology, not with theories, but with attention, with silence, with the simple act of pausing long enough to feel what cannot be proven. And in that pause, everything changed. The world did not explode. It harmonized. Sensors in orbit have gone quiet, not because they failed, but because the anomalies they once detected have stabilized. The magnetic pulses are now part of the background field. The spirals have moved from the sky into the soil, the water, the music. No alarms, no final flash, just coherence. In Indonesia, a seismologist notes that tectonic tremors have begun to form predictable loops, not dangerous, but rhythmic. She jokes, it's like the Earth is humming to itself again. In Finland, old glaciers crack open to reveal spiral cave systems previously unknown, perfectly smooth, and in one of them, etched into the ice, a glyph so simple, so elegant, it's instantly recognizable. The same spiral, the Atlas spiral. In Morocco, goats are climbing trees not randomly, but in perfect ascending rings, pausing on each branch as if part of a dance. The farmer who owns the grove does not explain. He just smiles and points upward, because that's what we do now. We don't explain, we feel. You walk through your days differently, not because the world outside has calmed, but because the world inside you has aligned. Conversations feel like currents now. Time feels like rhythm. And even pain, even uncertainty, moves in spirals, not crushing, but guiding. This is the real change 3i Atlas has caused. Not data, direction, not contact. Consciousness, and consciousness does not vanish when the object does. It reverberates. It echoes through breath, through memory, through the geometry of choice. Tonight, as stars rise and no comets blaze, something else begins, a gentle, planetary remembering. Children begin to speak in metaphors they should not yet know. Artists across continents draw the same symbols without having seen one another's work. Engineers begin to design structures not for efficiency, but for resonance. Temples of light, homes with spiral walls, bridges that hum in the wind. In Australia, the Aboriginal elders walk songlines once lost. They do not explain where they found them. They say only, "It returned to us." And so you understand, this was never about a warning. It was about a weaving, a reunion of memory and form, of spirit and frequency. And what now begins is not aftermath. It is affirmation of your place, of your pattern, of your participation. There is no need to chase 3i Atlas into the dark. Its path is not outbound, It is inbound now, into the spaces between perception, into the songs we sing, the choices we make, the way we sit with one another in silence. It does not need to be visible. It has become vibrational, and you, dear listener, are tuned. You carry the spiral forward. You hum its frequency when you walk gently on the earth. You breathe it in and exhale it as calm. You remember it every time you feel awe instead of analysis, and you embody it every time you stop seeking and simply sense, because that's the truest answer. That's the final reflection, that you were never separate from the message. You were the message all along. So now, as the spiral fades into stillness, let yourself rest. You are not lost in the cosmos. You are a harmony within it. Let your breath follow the rhythm you've always known. Let your dreams carry the echo of the shape that started it all. And when you wake, wake gently. The spiral continues in you. Leave a comment telling me what time it is and where you are right now. Let others feel your presence in the field. You are part of the signal now, and somewhere, 3i Atlas is listening. Good night, and welcome to the remembering.